Hi, welcome. It's been a great week with some fantastic contributions from you, and I've really enjoyed reading as many of the posts as I can manage. And that's been an aim of mine to read as wide a range as possible. So, looking back on this second week, we had some really good information and comments about the IB mission statement and CAS, and how important CAS was in terms of developing international mindedness and a holistic style of individual, and also the role of the CAS coordinator in actually helping to guide the students through that process. A couple of you mentioned how important it was for CAS coordinators also to make links with NGOs and to a lesser extent, depending on our circumstances, with governments. Then we moved on to look at the aims of CAS, and again, some really excellent posts, and not a lot to add to what you wrote about that. The third of the activities actually asked you to plan a lesson on learning outcomes, and wow, there's been some fantastic stuff here. Some really good practical activities for all of the learning outcomes, from building spaghetti towers and reflecting on it for learning outcomes 5. Some great stuff on learning outcomes 7, particularly on understanding the ethical implications of actions. And that is often one of the activities which, one of the learning outcomes which actually presents big problems for a lot of the kids to understand. The other activities posted there, really good. I really enjoyed reading them, and I think there's a wealth of teaching material there for you to share. And that's one of the things I've liked about seeing, particularly the collaborative work, was in our learning activity number 4, was the number of people who are willing to share resources with each other. And in looking at what is CAS and what is not as CAS, there are some fantastic, really fantastic charts devised by lots of different people, and there are lots of them that are worth, I think, including in student handbooks, so students can actually have a simple way of self-assessing whether something's CAS or not. So I'd like to thank everybody for that. I want to draw your attention to 3 particular points that came up, I think, in Katya's chart, which didn't seem to appear anywhere else. So I think they're worth mentioning because they're really important ones about what is CAS and what is not. One of the things she identified as not being CAS is something about proselytizing religions as an activity. Now, that has been traditionally unacceptable to the IB as a humanistic organisation. It's often sometimes difficult to decide where proselytizing starts and ends. So that's something you need to look at very carefully. Another thing which she raised was particularly about where service is either paid or done for the benefit of a family. And again, that's something traditionally which goes against the ethos of CAS. And lastly, she mentions the importance of students carrying experiences or activities that are not socially divisive. And the way I personally interpreted what she'd written was that this would be related particularly to students being involved in extremist political views, ones which are particularly very racist. Okay, so those are a few of my thoughts, and I look forward to hearing some of your comments about that. And then lastly, we had some absolutely fantastic ideas for projects and presentations about projects. A couple that came to mind were about teaching English to refugees and migrants, something that was extremely well planned. Another one about setting up urban gardens, which is, I think, a fabulous idea, and that's worth sort of looking into. And a third one that I really like the look of when I was going through them was actually about a well-planned hike. So in other words, a project which is not based in service. Those are the ones that stick out in my mind, but I have to say all the projects that I looked at looked really good, and also the presentations and information that you gave the students were really good. So great stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the project posts when they come in. Now for next week, we're in the third week, and that starts on Wednesday. And what we're going to do to start with in the first two activities is look at, first of all, at what's the vocabulary of service and service learning. And then we're actually going to delve into what is service learning. And there are a couple of videos to look at there, and there's also some material from Kathy Berger-Kay, which is, I think, worth reading, as are other materials that Kathy's produced. Then a consequence of service learning is that we should be seeing students actually make a link between the knowledge and skills they've learned in the subjects and service activities. That's really what service learning is all about, making that link between the two. And lastly, we're going to have a very brief look at the role of the theory of knowledge in CAS. And one of the things we're going to ask you to do is to identify some of the ethical dilemmas that your students have actually faced while doing their CAS. These could be the basis for a TOK presentation, and maybe that's something that you can consider and discuss with your TOK coordinator. So look, thanks for a great second week. I'm looking forward very much to your posts for this week.